The sun hung gently over the city, painting everything in soft daylight as people hurried down the sidewalks, living their busy little stories. But at a small outdoor cafe near the park, a young woman named Maureen sat frozen in place, her trembling hands wrapped tightly around a warm paper cup that had long gone cold. Her eyes, faint but expressive, kept scanning the faces of strangers walking by, as if searching for something she was terrified to face yet desperate to find. Today was supposed to be her blind date, her first attempt in years to believe she still deserved something good. But she hadn't expected her past wounds to resurface with such force, and she certainly hadn't expected the man she was supposed to meet, a single dad named Rule, to arrive earlier and overhear the emotional whisper she had muttered under her breath. When he gently approached her table, she lifted her face with a startled jolt, her tired eyes widening as she realized he had heard her question to herself, a question soaked in fear, exhaustion, and a lifetime of heartbreak. Do you think I still deserve happiness? Before we continue, viewers, if you believe in kindness, compassion, forgiveness, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindly Tube. Your support helps us spread stories that heal and inspire. Maureen's story didn't begin at the cafe, nor with a blind date she didn't know whether she was ready for. It began long before that, in a tiny rental room she had called home for nearly 2 years. She had moved there after escaping a life of manipulation and constant belittlement. Growing up in a household where she was blamed for everything, from the weather to other people's bad moods, she learned early that her existence was an inconvenience. Her father abandoned her before she was old enough to speak, and her mother, carrying her own bitterness, often directed her frustration at Maureen. The girl grew up learning to be silent, to shrink herself, to never expect kindness. The world, she believed, wasn't made for people like her, yet something inside her, small but stubborn, refused to fully die. She worked multiple jobs, saved what she could, and began rebuilding a life, step by shaky step. Despite her poverty and exhaustion, she carried a gentle heart that still believed in helping others. Neighbors would often find her sharing food, offering help, or comforting children in the building even when she barely had enough for herself. But the one thing she never gave herself was permission to dream of love. She had convinced herself she wasn't enough, not pretty enough, not successful enough, not deserving enough. Her co-worker, however, had noticed her kindness and loneliness. That co-worker, an older woman named Sarah, believed Maureen needed more than just survival. She needed companionship and a chance to be seen for who she truly was. So Sarah set her up on a blind date with someone she trusted deeply, Rule, a hard-working single dad. Rule's life hadn't been gentle either. He had been abandoned by his partner shortly after their daughter Lyran was born, leaving him to navigate fatherhood alone. He worked long shifts as a delivery driver, juggling bills, fatigue, and childcare with a resilience that came from loving his little girl more than anything. But Rule had reached a point where the loneliness felt heavier than usual, and he had finally agreed to try meeting someone new, someone real, someone genuine. Fate, or perhaps the quiet guidance of two hearts longing for healing, had brought both of them to that same cafe on a sunny afternoon. But when Rule approached, he didn't expect to hear her trembling voice asking herself whether she still deserved happiness. He didn't know her story, her scars, or the reasons her eyes carried so much sadness. But he saw something in her expression that felt deeply familiar, the look of someone who had been surviving instead of living, and so they sat together, awkward at first, both unsure how much of themselves they were allowed to share. The city buzzed gently around them, sunlight filtering through the trees, casting shifting patterns on the pavement. The world seemed to slow, giving Maureen just enough room to breathe and Rule enough courage to simply be present. She didn't answer his first few questions easily. Her mind kept whispering that this wasn't for her, that love wasn't meant for someone who had spent their whole life being told she wasn't enough, but Rule didn't push her. He talked about small, simple things, his daughter, his job, funny moments he had experienced while raising a toddler alone. Slowly, Maureen found herself relaxing, her shoulders lowering, her heartbeat steadying. She noticed the sincerity in his eyes and the gentle tone in his voice when he mentioned Lyran. It didn't feel like a date, it felt like a warm afternoon shared between two strangers who had lived through storms and were finally sitting in the sunshine. As the minutes passed, she found herself opening up. She talked about her job at the bakery, how she saved every small tip she earned, how she tried her hardest to stay kind despite everything. She didn't reveal the darkest parts yet, but she didn't need to. Rule could see the weight she carried in the way she spoke, the way she hesitated before describing anything good about herself. They spent nearly 2 hours talking before Rule received a call from his daughter's daycare. Lyran had gotten upset and was asking for him. Rule apologized and quickly prepared to leave. Maureen smiled genuinely for the first time, encouraged him to go, and expected the day to end there. She didn't think he would want to meet her again, but he did something she didn't expect. He asked if she wanted to walk with him to pick up his daughter. Her heart thumped painfully. She almost said no. But something warm, something she hadn't felt in a long time, whispered that maybe, just maybe, this moment could be the beginning of something good. She said yes. They walked together through sunlit streets, the breeze soft against their faces. When they reached the daycare, little Lyran ran to her father with a burst of joy, wrapping her tiny arms around his legs. Then she looked up at Maureen with curious, gentle eyes. Children always sensed kindness in Maureen, and they always gravitated toward her. Within seconds, Lyran held Maureen's hand and showed her a flower she had picked earlier. Maureen was startled by how easily the child accepted her presence. The three of them walked back to the park, and it was Lyran who insisted they sit at a bench under a broad tree, its leaves shimmering under the daylight. Lyran played in the grass while Maureen and Rule sat in a silence that felt peaceful, not awkward. But silence didn't leave Maureen alone. Her mind replayed memories, shouts, insults, loneliness. At some point, the emotions built too quickly, and she lowered her gaze, blinking rapidly to keep from crying. Rule noticed. He didn't ask anything, but his presence alone felt like a steady place she hadn't had in years. She finally whispered the words again, this time not to herself, but softly toward the breeze that moved through the leaves. Do you think someone like me still deserves happiness? The question made Rule's chest tighten. He didn't give her a dramatic answer or a rehearsed statement. Instead, he shared a small piece of his own story, not the painful parts, but the truth that he, too, once doubted he deserved anything good after being left alone. His gentle honesty was enough. It didn't erase her wounds, but it made her feel seen, not judged, not pitted, just seen. Over the next few weeks, they met again and again, always in the daytime, always in peaceful places. Maureen helped Rule with Lyran, and Rule helped Maureen realize her worth. They didn't rush anything. They simply allowed themselves to exist together, two broken people learning they didn't have to be perfect to be deserving of love. Maureen blossomed slowly, smiling more, laughing without fear, allowing herself to believe she didn't need to apologize for existing. But every story has a turning point, a moment that tests whether the characters are ready to grow. For Maureen, that moment came when her mother unexpectedly showed up at her small room one morning, demanding money she didn't have. The confrontation stirred every painful memory Maureen had fought to escape. Her mother accused her of being useless, ungrateful, pathetic. The words hit her harder than she expected. She spent the entire day trembling, fighting tears, questioning whether she had been foolish to think she could ever have a better life. That evening, when Rule called to ask how she was, she couldn't hide the distress in her voice. Without hesitation, he came to see her, bringing Lyran along. And when he arrived, Maureen broke down completely, not because she was weak, but because she had carried too much for too long. Rule didn't fix everything. He didn't offer empty promises. He simply held her hand, reminding her through his quiet presence that she wasn't alone anymore. Lyran climbed onto her lap and wrapped her little arms around her, and that small gesture shattered whatever remained of Maureen's belief that she was undeserving of love. From that moment on, Maureen made a decision not to forget her past, but to stop letting it define her future. She allowed herself to accept kindness, to accept care, and eventually, to accept love. She and Rule continued to build a bond that grew naturally, beautifully, and gently. Months later, on a warm sunny afternoon at the same cafe where their story began, Rule held her hand and told her she had changed his life as much as he had changed hers. Maureen didn't ask whether she deserved happiness anymore. She finally understood that deserving had nothing to do with it. Happiness was something every human being was born worthy of, something she had simply been denied for too long, and so,